Donna, and you are joining us for Jesus-Centric Leadership, and I'm here with Pastor Josh. We are in part one of discussing our culture and the values that we've established or are really kind of embracing as we move into this next season of ministry at Peace with Christ. So I'm going to throw you a curveball right from the get-go.
Thanks.
I think that might be how we ended last podcast was me doing that. But I want to ask you, Pastor, so let's say I work for a corporation, and I appreciate the fact that you're talking about culture and now our values, but how does this apply to me in corporate America or in my home? How does Peace with Christ values and culture really work for me?
I think it's a question I struggle with. Like, I don't know that I have a perfect answer to you, other than to just say I think I've learned a lot about following Jesus from the people that are here. I've learned a lot about, we'll talk about positivity down the line. I don't think today, but we'll talk about down the line. And that's really something I learned from Peace. Like, you guys taught me about positivity. And so I think that's something that I now carry into my life and into my ministry that's really valuable to me. But I learned it from you. And so I think as we talk about these culture, I think some of them are things that I think we already embody very well. Some are things that some people embody, but others of us need to grow in. And so I think what this is going to do is it's going to help you understand us better as a church, but it's also going to give you some extra tools in your tool belt to operate out into the world. Like, I think in this world, positivity is such a countercultural thing.
Yeah.
But if you can see it here in Peace, you can experience it, but then you can hear that word, I think it really brings it full circle, and you can embody that once you hear it and once you experience it.
Yeah, I appreciate how you're saying that, because when I first read through the values, there's a few I wrestle with. Number one being one, and it's the verbiage that we're using. It's not necessarily the value. So it's okay to wrestle. It's okay for this not to be a clean blanket. This is what you got to do wherever you are.
Yeah.
But we hope that you take some pieces. We hope that you embrace it and maybe ask some hard questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think, when we talk about these, we're saying these are things that Jesus embodied, and things that I think if you're here at Peace, you're going to see people embodying as well. And to be able to wrestle with them and, have dialogue with other people. And
are we going to see them all right away?
No. And some of them you're going to be like, yeah, I love that one, but I've never seen that at Peace. Well, you get to help us build that in, because some of these are growth, a little bit of growth goals. Let's go and dive in.
All right, let's do it.
Right. First one is community. And the way we're saying it is that we resist radical individualism, yearn deeply for relationship, and prioritize others here. And this is Donna's favorite.
It's not that it's not my favorite. I do love the yearn deeply for relationships and prioritize others. It's that verbiage of resist radical individualism. So you're going to have to explain that again.
Yeah. So I think radical individualism best embodies, for me, the culture in Albany, New York. So before being here, I lived in Albany, New York for 4.5 years. And I remember going to Walmart one day. It was either Walmart or the grocery store, and there were these two people. They stopped right in front of me, and literally they had their carts right beside each other. They weren't talking to each other. They were both looking for things. They both saw me, and they just left their carts there in the middle while they looked for stuff. They didn't care. The only way I could have gone through was literally to push one of their carts out of the way. They saw me and they didn't care. So I literally, to get to the other side of the aisle, I had to walk around the whole way because they just wouldn't move. And I wasn't going to be patient sitting there and waiting, and I wasn't going to stare them down or say some nasty comment. But that for me was radical individualism, that I care only and only about myself. Right? And so we at Peace want to say that there's no place for that. There's no place for radical individualism. If Jesus came to serve us and love us, if he's called his followers to do the same, then I cannot and must not care only about myself.
All right, where have you seen the church do that?
Radical individualism?
Yeah.
Where have I seen? I think one place, and we're working on this, and I'm proud of peace, but is when we are in the lobby and there's new people walking by and we're only talking to the people we know, right? There's people walking through that maybe have never been in church or that don't have a friend, and we're in kind of circles. And Peace has actually done a great job since we started talking about community, not doing that. But yeah, we've seen that. But then, I go the opposite way, and one of our members, Erica, had a hard thing that happened in her life. She may be on the podcast talking about it at some point, but the congregation really rallied to provide for her and pray for her and check in with her. And so I've seen places where people have really, I'm going to say, sacrificed for the sake of others, sacrificed for the sake of community. Or I see people that go out of their way and will leave the circle of friends to talk to somebody new. And so those are things in community. Well, how do we sacrifice and how do we be generous for the people around us?
Now, the example that you used hits one that's hard for me. I'm a high extrovert, and yet meeting new people in the hallway before or after service is hard because 9 times out of 10, I introduce myself and they go, I've been here a while. And now I feel foolish. So I'm fearful of feeling foolish. So how do I push through a fear to live out this this yearning for relationship and prioritizing others? Yeah,
I think we have to understand that I get to be generous with my time and get to be generous with my gift of relationship that I get to give people. And I'm not just generous with financially, I'm not just generous with serving, but I'm generous with my relationship. I think that's really a big call for us. But I think it's really easy that's not the natural swing, though. Naturally, what happens is I move more toward myself than away from myself. And I think it's generally we say, well, if it's hard, then I shouldn't do it. I'm not sure.
I'm afraid.
Or if I'm afraid, then that's not who I'm supposed to be. But I think Jesus calls us to be in community and with other people.
So to look at almost like the payoff is bigger than the fear. It's not about me looking foolish. It's about me helping somebody feel seen and feel like there's a relationship there. And I'm not going to get there if I keep living in that fear of introducing myself to somebody that already knows me.
Yeah, I think absolutely. Yeah, and I think, and to say that it's easy to say that. It's hard to do that because like a lot of you as members, you're coming in and you have a lot in your life and a lot on your plate. And so having community and giving the gift of community is challenging. But let's just be honest, community, it's natural for community to be radically individualized. Like this is natural for us. The problem is what I generally do is I say if the people around me aren't good for me, then I kind of cancel them. Now, maybe I don't use the word cancel because that's kind of political right now, but if the people around me aren't good for me, I cancel them. But what's interesting about that is that leads to divided community, not unified community. If they offend me, if they challenge me, if they say something I don't like, then I just kind of cut them off because I don't need that in my life right now. But that's not what Jesus did. Right? We see Jesus on the cross being crucified, and what does he say? He says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they're doing. Now, a lot of times when we hear forgiving, we jump straight to, well, that's what God gave to us. He gave us grace. But forgiving is a relational word, right? And so even Jesus on the cross, he's being crucified. He still wants a relationship with these people that are crucifying him. Like, that's crazy. And that's the culture of Jesus and the culture that, no, we're not perfect at, but we should strive for.
Yeah, great example. All right, so great segue. You used the word generosity quite a few times. That's value number 2.
Yeah, absolutely. And the way we say it is the church does not exist to serve me, but is here to serve the world. It's a joy to give generously to Christ's mission.
Yeah, I know the times that we've been able to love others through disaster relief, to join in community with people who aren't necessarily part of our faith family, but want to jump on board of our disaster relief efforts. Man, the joy and the opportunities that we have are just filling.
Yeah, and I think even if you're not a Christian, there's value in that giving outside of yourself, and we see that in the culture, right? I read about a big CEO, I forget his name, but that he's not a Christian, but he believes in the idea of tithing as a non-Christian.
Wow.
He actually believes in the Bible. It's a biblical concept, and he knows it's from the Bible, but he acknowledges it that as a secular person, that there's value in tithing. There's value in giving outside of yourself for something. And again, that's where I believe that was wired into us. It wasn't wired into us to live for ourselves. And I believe your best life as a leader, as a follower of Jesus, isn't found in just serving yourself. Your best life is found in being generous to others.
We had, on our last disaster relief, somebody from the neighborhood stop by and said, hey, I just want to let you know I'm doing a big drive at my workplace for you guys, not part of our faith family, but they had trusted where they had given to us before, and now they wanted to be a part of the movement. And I've never forgotten that, because I was so thankful for their generosity to put boots on the ground in their workplace.
Yeah.
And they don't even know us that well, right?
Yeah.
It was great.
Yeah, I've had this great opportunity. Barb Branch, every year, she does a food bank collection at her work. And then they invite me or somebody else to the Christmas party. And I've gone a few years, and it's just, the people are so thankful for the opportunity to be generous, right? And so I think we just see this, there's this naturalness of generosity. But we as Christians want to be really intentional in that. How do we give some of our time to our church? How do we give some of our talent to our church? And how do we give some of our finances to our church? Right? All of that is part of our generosity.
And I think it's easy for the secular world to go, well, here they are again, asking for money. So how does the financial piece work? How do we live in that space?
So if we're going to go again back to what is Jesus' mission, is to seek and save the lost. What does that mean for us? Well, that means our mission is the same. And one of the ways that God accomplishes his mission is through his church. And so I, for one, am always grateful for the opportunity to give to that mission to my local church, wherever that is, but that I get to give to be a part of that mission. Give financially and of my time and talent and all that. But I think it's a great joy to be able to partner in the church in that way, because God does use the church to speak the gospel every Sunday and to equip the saints to go out and share the gospel. And I think to be able to give to that is huge.
In generosity, you've also talked a little bit about time. Which do you think is harder for people to give in today's world? Is it harder to be generous with our time or with our talent or with our finances?
I think it depends on how you're wired. I really think that different people are wired differently. Some are wired that it's really easy to give their time. Well, if that's you, if it's really easy and you feel like you're giving your time really well, then challenge yourself to give your money. But if it's really natural to give your money, don't stop giving your money, but challenge yourself to give your time as well. And I think it's really this idea of that following Jesus isn't supposed to be the simple, easy, non-messy thing. It's messy in the midst of a busy life, right? How do I find time to volunteer? Right, that's a big question.
Right.
How do I find margin in my finances?
Right.
But I think the reality is, if we're going to live on mission, we have to have margin in our life. We have to have margin that we can give. And that means intentional about sometimes carving that out and figuring out how we're going to find time to serve or to give.
I think it's interesting. I think Dave Ramsey with Financial Peace, in his final video, he talks about it wasn't ours. It's not mine. My time, my gifts, my money.
Yeah.
It's not mine. It's been entrusted to me.
Yeah.
And to be able to say I'm managing that well, I'm giving with a generous heart, which goes back to why that's such an important value.
Yeah.
The last one's leadership. Speak a little bit about that.
Yeah, so our phrase for it again is, there's no room for passive, rather active leaders, inviting others to follow me as I follow Christ on his mission.
So you're not necessarily talking to somebody who might be listening who maybe doesn't have the natural gift of leadership, correct?
So I think natural gift of leadership is an interesting idea, because I think we see a natural leader maybe as someone who's charismatic, who can set a vision, who can bring others into it. And I don't think every leader is that. I think leadership is, well, caring for the person to the left and right of you, which Simon Sinek says. But it's also saying this is saying, follow me as I follow Christ, right? Are you following Christ? Well, guess what? If you're following Christ, you have the ability to lead somebody in what that means a little deeper, right? If you pray, right? A lot of people don't know how to pray themselves. So if you have the ability to pray, you know what you have? You have the ability to lead somebody to connect with God in a new way. And so I think when we talk about leadership, we're not talking about, that dynamic up front, somebody who can lead a meeting, someone who can lead a big team or whatever, right? We're not talking about that. We're talking about somebody who can lead someone a step closer to Jesus.
Yeah. And I think our go-to is, when we hear the word leadership or hear that stated as a value is, well, I'm not a leader, so I'm going to fast forward and go to the next value, right?
Yeah.
But it's, again, I keep using this word, it's the privilege of who has God put in front of you and who has God put behind you, or who's God put to your left and to your right.
Yeah.
And being intentional in those relationships.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of overlap here with community, right, in Jesus. So we see the disciples, they're invited, right, to be in community with Jesus, but also to what? To learn from him, to be led by him. And leadership for Jesus wasn't sit down in a classroom. It wasn't sit down and listen to a podcast. It wasn't simply just knowledge, although I'm sure there was knowledge passed on, but it was life led together in which Jesus was teaching them to love God, love their neighbor, and what? And follow him on this mission to seek and save the lost, right? And so we have the disciples after 4 years, and they spent 4 years studying leadership. We see them come out, and then the church starts. God starts the church with the Holy Spirit and with other things. But it was that leadership was really key in that.
One of my very favorite times of the year is Vacation Bible School.
Okay.
I love seeing kids from our community come, but we do a training where we have all of our small group leaders and station leaders all gather. And each year I ask the question, how many of you were children in this Vacation Bible School? And 75% of people raise their hands. And that to me is, I learned it, I followed, and now who am I leading and who am I still following?
Yeah.
And they get the opportunity to give to these younger children what they learned when they were that age, the love, the relationship, and ultimately Jesus.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you say it, I think you asked your students this question, right? Who are you leading and who are you following?
Correct.
Right, which is a great question. And ultimately, it's got to be following Jesus. But we do want to make sure that we're leading people behind us. And I agree. That's a great example of that being put into practice, because at that point, when you're speaking into their leadership, you're not just telling them leadership concepts, you're helping them, because later on that day, they're going to go out and they're going to lead younger students during that day. Right, and that's exactly what it is with Jesus.
Yeah, and I think even taking time to value or thank those people that we're following. I had a friend named Dell, and she was just an amazing woman who loved the Lord, and I learned so much. And I remember just thanking her at one point. And I think that value, giving those people that value that they have emanated that they have challenged us, that they have helped us to love those that are behind us and have the patience, what we need, whatever, to be able to lead them.
Yeah, and I think most good Christian leaders don't actually think they have a ton to teach the people, but they are able to focus and ask the simple question, what little bit can I teach? What little ways can I lead people to know Jesus better? And that's what we mean by leadership, leading people closer to Jesus.
I'm excited to hear what we're going to talk about in the next group of values. So we hope that you join us for part 2. in our Jesus-Centric leadership as we continue to talk about our culture and the values that help us to get where we're going. Yeah, thanks for joining us.